Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Kristi. I'm an Ivy League educated PA, and I'm here to teach you how law of assumption and manifesting is simply just the natural function of your brain. There's nothing spiritual about it. It is very simple, not a mysterious process, and you are already an expert at doing it. Let's take the woo-woo out of manifesting. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you while I go on my beautiful morning walk. I'm going to be talking to you about the exact daily routine that I use that has helped me heal varying nagging body ailments, secure a salary that is in the top 1% of my field, lose over 100 pounds, and get absolute princess treatment in my relationships for the first time in my life. And I'd like to give you a little historical context so that you can get an idea of the time frame that everything happened. In 2018, so 19, 20, I gotta count on my fingers. Any other finger counters out there? I have to. 18, 19, 20, 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 years ago. Man, that's crazy. So 7 years ago, I was a staff sergeant in the Army National Guard. I was in school taking prerequisites to apply to PA school. I believe I was at the very end of that process. I may have already applied. Oh yeah, I did. I already applied. I was doing my clinical work that you need to get clinical hours in order to apply to PA school. I was being a phlebotomist at that time, drawing people's blood, and I experienced a sexual assault, and I did not know about law of assumption at this time. Luckily, in my case, the sexual assault was not extremely violent, but it was extremely emotionally damaging. It was very confusing and difficult for me to process, and I did develop PTSD as a result of both the assault, but not just that, the reporting and investigation process that occurred after the assault, which ultimately led to my assault being determined to be not my fault, but my responsibility, because I outranked in the National Guard the person who assaulted me, and I therefore should have been able to use my rank and authority to stop the assault. This absolutely obliterated any trust I had in organizations that were supposed to take care of me, and so the PTSD that I had came from a combination of both the physical assault, the emotional assault, and the absolutely abysmal handling of the investigation and reporting process. Again, I did not know about the law of assumption at that time. After the assault and I developed PTSD, just about every area of my life crumbled, absolutely crumbled. And by 2021, I was absolutely broke. I was facing eviction. I hadn't paid my rent in 3 months. I was facing eviction. I had graduated from PA school by this time, had not yet found a job. Student loans were being due, rent was due, I had no money. And my marriage had failed by this time, so I was going through significant heartbreak. As a result of the PTSD, I began eating myself into an absolute stupor, and I had always been overweight. Like, maintaining a low weight for the military was always something that I had to focus on and give a lot of attention to. And I had gained about 80 pounds during that assault, or after that assault. I think that I had gained the 80 pounds by 2020, and I had been trying to lose it with no success, kind of yo-yoing the same 10 pounds up and down. And basically all of my friendships that I had that were tied to the National Guard, I had lost all of those in the wake of the investigation. So my life was a hot mess. I was in a lot of despair. I was the most depressed I had ever been, dealing with PTSD, having panic attacks. And so I went searching, as many people do, and that is how I came to find the law of assumption. Initially, it was to soothe my heartbreak and get back into a relationship that I had lost, but it ended up touching every area of my life in the most incredible and life-altering ways. So I'm going to tell you exactly how I use the law of assumption every single day, how I used it then and how I use it now, because it's slightly different. I have matured in my manifesting process. And if you want to understand why, as a PA, I endorse the law of assumption and manifesting as being a real thing that you can actually do, there are several videos on my channel explaining the neuroscience of manifesting and why it is not a spiritual process at all. And you can go check those out for more context on that. So as soon as I learned about the law of assumption, I began consuming mass amounts of content from YouTube. This was very important in the early days because it led me to resources. It led me to finding Neville Goddard's books in The Complete Reader, which I immediately bought and began reading. I found a few coaches that were teaching the law of assumption appropriately and not incorporating any spiritual dogma or any law of attraction. And that, combined with reading both Neville Goddard and Joseph Murphy, is what built my belief and understanding of how to use the law of assumption. Now, I've completed PA school by this time, so I have a background now in neurology, neuroscience, neuroanatomy, physiology of the brain. And I started to put these pieces together, like why your 3D circumstances don't actually matter and why the law of assumption actually works, why it is that your imagination creates your reality, and that is absolutely true. Again, go check out some of the neuroscience videos that I have posted for more context on that. There is a playlist for those. And that helped to deepen my belief. In the beginning, I would script somewhat regularly. It helped me to keep my mind focused on what I wanted, because I was very afflicted by PTSD at that time and would have a lot of intrusive thoughts and flashbacks and difficulty keeping my mind focused on what I would rather experience instead of all of the thoughts that my brain was serving to me about the quote-unquote truth of my reality. And so I found scripting to be helpful at that time. So I would script a fair amount. I also became aware of the practice of listening to affirmations either subliminally or just recorded affirmations quietly while I slept, and I began doing that just about every night. The science of whether or not that is less clear because it's very difficult to design a scientific study to test it when you have to develop a control and variables and how do you measure outcomes. However, what we do know is that when you go to sleep, the conscious brain rests and the subconscious brain takes over, and it actually turns up your senses that are available to it, including touch proprioception, like tactile feeling, and hearing, because those are, and smell as well, because that evolutionarily will protect against danger while you're sleeping, which is why if you've ever, I remember this phenomenon so clearly when I was young, I would, in an effort to fall asleep, after I got a television in my room, which I don't sleep with television on anymore, but when I was younger, I would turn it down to the very lowest volume, like volume 1, where I could barely hear anything, like just enough to have something going on while I'm drifting off to sleep. And then at some point I would wake up in the middle of the night, had obviously not changed the volume, and it felt so loud. I could hear everything very clearly. And I've also, and you may have experienced this too, had the phenomenon if you were falling asleep during a scary movie, that scary movie may follow you into your dreams, or, some of the last things that you're thinking about will be things that you dream about. And so all of these are sufficient enough to me as a PA to find enough validity or possibility in the efficacy of listening to sleep tracks at night that I chose to do it and chose to put my faith in it as something that will work for me. And again, that is an assumption at work. Building a belief, choosing an assumption. I assume that listening to sleep tracks at night will help me, and therefore I do believe they have helped me. The science on that is unclear though, but for the reasons that I shared with you, I think it is reasonable to try and see what your results are. So that's another thing I did every single day, and I still do that very regularly. There are times when I take breaks, and I have noticed that during the times that I take breaks from that, some very deeply seated old beliefs start creeping up into my reality. I can see evidence of them in my reality, which I don't like and I don't want. And so I will write new affirmations. I record them on the Parrot app because I have an iPhone. And I will listen to them at the lowest volume at night. And then I have found that those beliefs and the repercussions of those beliefs will fade away in my reality. I was getting a lot of intrusive thoughts due to PTSD, and the way that I would handle those, number one, is understanding where they come from. And I have a video especially on intrusive thoughts that talks about the default mode network and why you should not be giving nearly as much power to your intrusive thoughts as you may be inclined to give. So understanding that helped me with my intrusive thoughts, and also whenever they would come up, I would immediately interrupt them verbally a lot of times, because again, PTSD, the intrusive thoughts can be very, very loud and very believable. Your brain is only trying to protect you, and the intrusive thoughts will prevent you from participating in activities or seeing opportunities that will possibly lead to harm, according to what your brain believes due to whatever trauma you experienced. So I interrupt them, oftentimes verbally. I will talk to my brain as though it is not me, and I will say, "Oh, that's interesting, brain. Okay, well, thank you so much for your input. That's not something I want to think about or focus on right now." And then I will immediately seek a conscious distraction, because when you are consciously focused on something, your default mode network, which is a function of your subconscious brain, it is not involved in the conscious executive frontal lobe thinking process. It's a different part of the brain. It has to quiet down. The intrusive thoughts that you experience after you interrupt the default mode network and begin to attempt to focus on something else are now your conscious brain buying in to the intrusive thoughts and giving yourself arguments for them. I was in a codependent relationship that ended, and thoughts of him lived rent-free in my brain. Many of my intrusive thoughts were related to him and our relationship. And so even when I would interrupt the intrusive thought and speak to myself and consciously attempt to divert my thoughts, sometimes I would then just consciously ruminate. And that was a lack of discipline, not necessarily through any choice in the matter. It was just simply, I had put so much belief in these thoughts for so long. It took effort and time for those thoughts to loosen their grip and their power over me. But they eventually did, and that is because when you reinforce new thoughts with repetition, new neural pathways form and they deepen, they strengthen in your brain. And the less attention you give to old neural pathways and old thoughts, the less you will be met with them. And this is how the brain works. This is guaranteed. And it may feel frustrating to persist through this discomfort, but you must, because it is guaranteed that the more you repeat new beneficial thoughts, the more your brain will buy into those thoughts, and the less your brain will believe the old, ugly, intrusive thoughts and beliefs. Repetition is required for as long as it takes. And so some things that I have been manifesting, because I'm a middle-aged person, I have many years of indoctrination and belief in some of these thoughts. Those things are taking longer, or did take longer, that I wanted to manifest that I have no opposing beliefs to. I also went to therapy during this time. I take mental health medications because these are modalities that I have general belief in, and because of that, I utilize them in order to manifest a life that I would prefer to live, which includes not being crippled by depression, not being ruled by PTSD. And in my mind at the time, I believed in those modalities. So I sought the opportunity to employ those modalities, and they have been beneficial to me. Additionally, and this has been true ever since I learned about the law of assumption, I will actively think beneficial thoughts for myself whenever I am just doing nothing, or whenever a thought comes to mind about a desire that I have, I will think thoughts that are beneficial towards me having it. I absolutely refuse to participate in any self-pity. I take full responsibility for my reactions and behaviors to the events of my life. And that was a hard pill to swallow, because it was not my fault that I was assaulted, right? I didn't seek that out consciously. I didn't want that to happen. But I truly believe that all 3D circumstances and events are neutral until you give them meaning. And so because I am here talking to you now with a six-figure salary, multi-six-figure salary now, getting princess treatment from men in my life, down over 100 pounds, because those things have occurred and I am talking to you, I consider my assault to be the best thing to ever happen to me, because it led me to seeking this information out, which has changed every aspect of my life for good. Now, what I do now has changed slightly from what I did in the early days because I believe I have matured in manifesting. I am better at it, was at the beginning, which just comes with repetition and practice. So I don't script as much anymore. If I'm feeling particularly triggered, which doesn't happen often, but every once in a while it will, I will sit down and script because it allows me to focus my brain. It provides both a mental and physical focusing mechanism for the thoughts that I would rather have on that topic. I like to write down my desires in a manifesting notebook so I can kind of see, and obviously I don't do this with everything because we have desires that float through our head all the time, but I do like when something comes to mind, I do like to write it down if I remember. That way I can come back to it and see what was going on in my life before that thing came to pass, and then once it has come to pass. But I'm not scripting very much anymore, not with regularity. Scripting is a technique that is not necessary. It's just to help you focus your brain to thinking thoughts that are beneficial to you. I also deliberately choose not to complain the majority of the time. If I catch myself complaining, I stop because you're telling your reticular activating system with your conscious thoughts what is important. And if negativity and seeking out negativity in your situation is what you are doing with your conscious thoughts, the reticular activating system will assume that that's important to you and it will continue to find things to aggravate you. So if I notice something I don't like, I just typically will tell myself, I don't know, somehow, some way it's gonna work out in my favor. I don't like it. I don't know what's going on. This is frustrating. I hate this. But somehow, some way it will work out for me, and then I try to drop it. I focus more on embodiment now than I do on micromanaging the thoughts of having it. So for example, I focus more on I am statements, which is what Neville recommends. In his mind, it's the most powerful way to manifest, and I also believe that is true. So I focus a lot on I am statements, focus a lot on being the person who would have whatever thing it is that I want. I'm going on a lovely walk because the person who has the body of my dreams, she walks, right? Walking is incredible, has incredible benefits for your mental health, for keeping your weight low, for actual life longevity. And so I want to be a person who loves walking regularly. Whenever I don't feel like walking, if I don't feel as though I am a little run down, I will remind myself who I am in the way of who I'd rather be. And I incorporate those types of affirmations into my sleep recordings as well. One of the things that I previously was not very consistent with was being consistent and had an aversion to doing things that needed to get done. And so I addressed those in my sleep tracks because those are behaviors that had persisted for decades, and so I want to focus on them with as much repetition as possible to overcome decades of a belief in myself that I'm not consistent and that that I struggle to do what needs to be done. I struggle, I used to tell people all the time, like, I'm really bad at adulting. I don't want to be. I would much rather be easy breezy. Adulting is nothing for me. So I address that in my sleep tracks. And that allows me to better embody the woman that I would prefer to be, which is a woman who goes on daily walks, among other things. Related to my weight loss, I have a lot of affirmations related to my weight loss in my sleep tracks that I write for myself because I have many decades of being overweight or obese in my history. And so I feel that it's very important to combat that with a lot of repetition. And so I tell my body that it naturally wants to be at a healthy weight. It prefers to be at a healthy weight. I enjoy being hungry a little bit because the friends that I have had in my life that were naturally skinny prefer to be hungry over feeling stuffed and full. So they will eat to a point where they feel just a little bit less than full because they don't like the feeling of being full. And they are very content to sit with their hunger. And so I want to embody someone who is naturally slender, who naturally sits at a healthy body weight. And so whenever I learn things about who the people are that naturally embody that state, I will incorporate that into my affirmations. I also will tell my body what I want it to weigh. So as I was losing weight from the nearly 300 pounds starting weight that I would, in my nighttime affirmations, tell myself how thankful I am that it was so easy to lose the 10 pounds, whatever the decade pounds was. I'm so happy it was so easy for me to get down below 280. I'm so happy that it was so easy for me to get down below 270. My body just really craves and loves weighing less than 270. And I would do that for every 10 pounds. I felt like that was a way more manageable approach than being like, I'm at a healthy body weight, or, my goal weight is 175 pounds. When you're 300 pounds, or at least when I was 300 pounds, it felt like a lot to affirm that I was at my goal weight. Obviously, I am faced with the facts of the matter that I am not at my goal weight every morning when I look in the mirror and every morning when I get on the scale. If I get on the scale and it says something that I don't want it to say, like maybe I'm bloated or had too much salt and so I'm holding on to water or whatever, I will talk to the scale and be like, whatever it says, like, okay, yeah, it says that, but what's actually true is like, I actually weigh the weight that I would prefer to weigh. And again, because I'm only taking things in 10-pound increments, that's a lot easier for my brain to get on board with. Be like, oh yeah, you're holding on to like 5 pounds of water weight based on the time of the month or based on whatever thing. But if the scale says something I don't like, I don't ever take it to mean that I'm not being successful. Now, one thing that did happen recently is I stopped listening to sleep tracks for a period of about 10 months. And like I told you earlier, when I do that, I notice old beliefs and things start manifesting themselves into my reality again. Not necessarily because I'm actively thinking of those things, but because they had been such prominent beliefs and thoughts for me for so many years that those neural pathways are still strong and still active. And the manifestation of some of those beliefs had to do with my weight loss. So the way that played out in my physical reality is I lost my access to the GLP-1 medication that I have been taking because I left my job at the weight loss clinic for a higher paying job, again, because I was actively focused on making more money. But I kind of got lazy and comfortable in my affirmations about my body, and I had stopped listening to sleep affirmations. So there was very little input happening to combat my understanding and belief that when you come off of a GLP-1, a lot of folks will gain weight back. Again, I'm a healthcare provider. I have a belief in medicine. And so sure enough, what do you think will happen to me according to the beliefs if I'm not combating them with a preferred belief reality? So I gained weight back during that period of time when I did not have access to GLP-1 medication and I was my body was coming off of it. So the lack of focus on my conscious and subconscious thoughts related to my body. Oh, and also I had started my TikTok by this time and I was talking to my audience about weight loss and permanent weight loss. And I learned that brought up a lot of feelings of imposter syndrome in me because I spent so much of my life overweight or obese. And this is what will happen to you. You will experience your life and learn more and more about what your deeply held beliefs are based on what manifests in your life. So prior to the law of assumption, I would not have looked at my beliefs to sort of decode what had gone quote unquote wrong with my weight loss. I'm on TikTok talking to people about the law of assumption and my weight is going up and that feels very impostery. Prior to the law of assumption, I wouldn't be teaching law of assumption, but my interpretation of those facts would probably be much different than they are now, because I realize now that the weight regain that I experienced was entirely due to what was going on or not going on as needed in my mind related to having my dream body, what was going on or not going on related to insecurities I felt about being an entrepreneur and talking about weight loss as an expert, even though I am both a career expert because I've helped over 2,000 people with their weight loss goals at a weight loss clinic, and a personal expert because number one, I lost 100 pounds to join the military and I kept 80 of those pounds off for 12 years before the assault, and my response to the assault was to eat myself into oblivion, which again, I take full responsibility for my response to the facts of my life, and I had to deal with those facts. So once I sort of was able to put together what was going on, I immediately got back on sleep tracks. I rewrote some sleep affirmations, and I don't just focus on my weight, but I did resume focusing on my weight. I prioritized finding access to GLP-1 medications again. I am now taking my GLP-1 medications as prescribed because in my mind, that is an incredibly helpful way to achieve the body of my dreams. Are there other ways? Of course. I don't believe as strongly in those for myself, and therefore manifesting the body of my dreams is going to take the path of least resistance, which in my case now is GLP-1 medication, which has been great. I was able to lose 50 pounds on my own before GLP, and then over 50 more pounds after GLP. So since getting back on track with my thoughts and my embodiment of those thoughts, I'm 20 pounds down and continuing on that downward trajectory. And now that I understand where I slipped up before in my mind, it's not about what you do out here. It starts in your mind. I have addressed that in a way that is far more consistent, because I see that if I stop putting my conscious focus on that, old beliefs will begin to manifest again. I started putting more conscious thought into that area, and now the weight is dropping off of me again. And you can apply that to any area, if that's codependency or anxious attachment. If you have spent most of your life anxiously attached in relationships, and you stop consciously focusing on a reality that you would prefer of secure attachment, well, the old neural pathways that have been going in your brain for decades are going to start to manifest themselves if there's nothing opposing them. Things that you have less resistance to or less years of issues with, you probably won't have to do that. I had never made six-figure salary before, so the first $100,000 salary that I got, I was actively working on the six-figure aspect of it, because I had never had that before. I didn't know what that would feel like. Not all PAs make six figures. Some of the PAs that I were training under during school were making like $85,000, $90,000 a year, which was still more than I was making prior to my career change, but not what I wanted. And so once I got to that six-figure range and I lived there for a while, it became normal. And now there's no way I'll make less than six figures ever again. Now I make, how much do I bring home now? I always forget this number, this figure exactly. I think it's around 240,000, 250, something like that, which I'm working on earning more, not necessarily through the PA path, because I don't know if I believe that I can make more than that as a PA. So right now, I'm manifesting that I bring home $20,000 a month. So I'm bringing home about 15 right now. And so I'm always seeking to break the ceiling. So this was kind of a long one, but that's everything that I do. That is my manifesting routine. It is all about disciplining your mind to not think thoughts. It's just so simple. It's so simple. You need to discipline your mind to no longer choose to think thoughts that are unfavorable to you. That is all that you have to do. Understanding the neuroanatomy of manifesting helps, because it helps you to give less power to the behaviors that your mind will naturally do. So go check out those videos. And it's been a minute since I posted, because I went to Cuba, which is another thing that I manifested. I'm so happy that I got the opportunity to go to Cuba and practice my Spanish that I've been learning, which I also manifested. And before I went to Cuba, like in the days leading up to going, I got COVID, which I have a belief that I never get sick, and I basically never get sick, but I did get COVID, which ended up working out great because I needed the extra time, or I ended up needing rather the extra time to pack and get my things together, so I couldn't go to work with COVID. It ended up working out great. Like, the things in your life that happen that appear bad on the surface are only bad if you agree that they're bad. So is having COVID ideal? No, but it was the easiest thing for my brain to give me the time that I needed. It was the easiest way to get me out of work so that I could prepare and pack for the trip without feeling stressed out on time. And so I'm super thankful that I got COVID right before my trip. I went to the doctor because, again, I'm a provider and I believe in medicine. So I went and I got medication for COVID. I took it. My COVID was gone. I went to Cuba. It was great. So now that I am back home from Cuba, which had very unreliable internet, and I was a little bit happy because I didn't check my email and I was very present during the time that I was there. Now that I'm back, though, I have videos to make for you. So if you found this video helpful, and I know that you did, please do interact with it so YouTube understands that it's helpful and valuable, and they will send it out to more people so that we can help other people take the woo-woo out of manifesting. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye.